pauseforthetruth.com. I don't know why I said .com. Dr. Kane, when are you going to catch me? Welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner, your co-host for the evening. I hope everyone is having a lovely day. So if you're in Florida, it was a pretty good day. The weather has been a little cool, at least cold for us Floridians. But if you live somewhere else out of Florida, all I can say is, I'm sorry. No, I'm just
too bad.
But anyway, Dr. Kane is with us tonight. Of course, he is the co-host. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I am absolutely fine. I can't complain. I'm just so excited. Look at about a colonoscopy, something that I can say I've witnessed on several occasions. But
Yeah, we were talking a few minutes ago, Dr. Kane, as you know, Tyrone Jackson, our behind the scenes guy, he referenced to our guest that we're going to have a very exciting show. And he's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know how exciting talking about having colonoscopies are, but anyway, we're going to give it a shot, right?
give it a best shot.
So tonight's discussion is on a serious tip. Are you at risk for colorectal cancer? And we're pleased to have a very distinguished panel of guests with us. And first, I am going to meet for the very first time Dr. Cian Chisholm. Dr. Chisholm is a gastroenterologist. Did I pronounce it right? Did my English teachers do justice?
They did. You did perfect.
The name, Dr. Chisholm, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Also, we have Miss Linda Lockett Brown. And Linda, I met a few years ago, and she is a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian, and too many other credentials to add past her name. How are you doing tonight, Linda?
Doing fine. Glad to be here.
Wonderful, and so happy to have you. And last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Renard Rawls, also a gastroenterologist. How are you doing this evening,
I'm
Dr.
doing
Rawls?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Rawls, I have to say that I've been a part of your presentations in the past, and I don't cringe when I see you, but I do start taking my life seriously when I have a conversation with you. I'm sure Dr. Chisholm and Linda will also remind me of what I should be doing. So let's go ahead and get the discussion started by first of all saying, and I don't know which one of you want to say, let's just go ahead and first start out. What is colorectal cancer and exactly what part of our body are we talking about for those persons who may not have taken anatomy and physiology like I did?
Well, let's start here. The GI tract starts at the mouth and basically goes all the way down to the anus. And the final 5 to 6 feet of the GI tract is called the colon or large intestines. And its main function is basically it's a storage organ, right? It stores stool until time of elimination. It also has some other functions. It reabsorbs water, a small amount, and minerals also, but its main function is a storage organ. And colon cancer is basically the abnormal growth of cells in this portion of the GI tract.
Wow, Dr. Rawls, I promise you, although we've talked about it before, I don't know if I ever asked you the question that way, but you sure broke that thing down. But I have a follow-up question. What happens when you mentioned that the lower portion of that area is where stool is stored? What happens if the stool doesn't come out freely? Is that where the polyps or things begin to cell, those abnormal cells start to grow when you don't have that regular flow?
Well, that's an interesting question. There are a number of factors that lead to polyp formation. Some are genetic. If we have a family history of polyps or colorectal cancer, it will put us at an increased risk of colorectal cancer. And some of the factors are environmental. we recommend a diet high in fiber. You want to take in at least 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. And I don't want to step on Dr. Brown's feet there. But also we want to decrease the amount of red meat in the diet, processed foods, such as hot dogs or lunch meat. Also, excess alcohol intake puts you at an increased risk of polyp formation or colorectal cancer. Tobacco use in general puts you at an increased risk. And of course, we mentioned the family history, which is a big part also.
Ms. Turner, I got a quick question I want to throw in, a quick statement, then a question. Just for those that are listening, GI tract just means gastrointestinal tract.
Oh.
For those that, just in case,
yes.
those that wonder what GI tract means. The other thing is, and I'm going to address this to Dr. Chisholm. So, Dr. Chisholm, what is a regular bowel movement? How do you define a regular bowel movement?
So some people have bowel movements very regularly every single day. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a bowel movement every single day that you're considered constipated. At least 3 bowel movements with good volume 3 times per week is still considered normal pattern. But some patients are more regular than that, where they can have a higher metabolism and have more frequent bowel movements that are formed, several times per day. So everyone is different. But when the stool pattern changes, where someone may be passing a small volume of stool or very hard stool or pellet-like stools, then you're kind of getting more into the side of constipation, and that could mean that you need to have increased water intake or more fiber intake, like Dr. Rawls discussed. There's many different variables of why someone's bowel pattern could be different. So definitely we would have to get that history from the patient as far as what their nutritional intake is.
Good point. Yes.
And
And what I see
as
in,
a primary care physician, I need to make sure patients understand what I get a question all the time about a regular bowel movement. And Ms. Brown, Dr. Brown, which Jocelyn just says a lot of initials behind your name, in which I don't see it, so I didn't want to be disrespectful. The things that can help increase the frequency of bowel movements is a high fiber diet. Enlighten us on that, please, ma'am.
I'm going to say 2 things. In my clients that tend to be constipated, there are 2 things they don't do. They don't drink enough water,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. And
Mr. Turner, are you an advertiser? Are you an advertiser? Are we marketing something here or something?
not at all. It is amazing. So I'll have a client eat 2 carrots, just 2 carrots, drink 16 ounces of water, and go for a walk. And if it doesn't work, I'll say, call me back. Very few people call me back.
Wow.
Because that amount of water and that amount of fiber will get the GI tract moving. So that's the goal, to keep it moving. So what you were mentioning earlier about the colon being a storage area, the goal is not to have stool stored in your colon for large amounts of time.
True.
So that's the goal. So it's really eating fruits and vegetables and drinking lots of water and moving.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So
Go ahead, JT.
no, so with that, because I was telling some friends that we were doing this show tonight, and one of them asked this question, Linda, specifically of you. Are there foods, or any of our guests, but I told them who we were having on, are there foods that hinder or help to have a healthy colon?
The foods that help are high fiber foods and water. The foods that hinder, just as was mentioned earlier, red meat, including beef and pork, which we tend to like, smoked foods. Those actually produce these things we call free radicals. And in the colon, that's actually what damages the cells that start these disease processes. So it's a lot of the things that our culture eats a lot of. And it doesn't mean you can never have a steak. It doesn't mean you can never have a pork chop. It doesn't mean, although it should, that you should never have fried chicken. You just want to make that the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, I always wonder, when people eat fried chicken, and I mean, you look at a chicken running around the barnyard on 2 feet, and people go, "I'm gonna eat that." I just wonder where that.
Another interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Brown, when you mentioned red meat and the temperature at which that meat is cooked also plays a factor. Meat that's red meat that's well done, there's more hydrocarbons, which are carcinogenic also. And so I don't know.
Cooked on a grill. If you like your meat cooked on a grill to the point where it's crusty, that crusty part contains those carcinogens.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
So you're saying red meat is better?
So definitely charring the meat can even cause some conversion to nitrates or nitrites within the meat itself, which can, increase that risk, like she mentioned. And one important thing is also moving. A lot of patients are sedentary. A lot of patients do not get out there and move. And so just trying to encourage people to get out and exercise, whether it's like for a walk after you have a meal or something like that to stimulate the GI tract, is very helpful.
That's right.
That kind of brings up real quick. Sorry, JT. It brings up a discussion I had with one of my patients. They are truck drive. And these guys they work long hours, but they're very sedentary, as well as police officers. And then back in the day, we used to talk about taxi cab, but now we're doing Ubers, and Ubers are usually part-time. But anyway, anybody can answer this, any particular advice to give those guys? Because again, they can drive 12 hours at a time, up to 12 hours at a time. And they wind up having maybe, like you said, being so sedentary, it goes against what's needed to have a healthy, quote unquote, healthy colon.
I have quite a few truck drivers as clients, and you bring up a very good point. The ones that have the regular routes, like I have some that go from Jacksonville to New York up I-95. What we've done is we've mapped out the route. And they actually stop at specific rest stops. And I have them walk around the truck for, I think, 10, 15 minutes is as long as they can do this. And then I also have them carry fruit with them in coolers. And so they have a regimen. Every this many hours you're going to drink, you're going to have fruit. You're not going to have the fried chicken at the truck stop. You're going to have the salad, because the salads are there. The salads are there. And then one day a week, they can eat whatever they want. But that is an issue. And so I've had to actually help my clients plan their stops. So I can tell you pretty much every rest stop on I-95 from here to New York City.
Wow.
Well, I want to transition a bit, and we're going to get back to that, but I just have a question. So if folks who, I know someone who had a family member fairly young who died of colorectal cancer. So if someone has an immediate family history of colorectal cancer, at what age should they start having a colonoscopy?
There's a family history. Usually we say first degree relative. So we start the screening process at age 40 or 10 years younger than the family member at the time of diagnosis, whichever age is younger. So say, for instance, if you have a family member who was diagnosed at age, say, 35,
Mm-hmm.
then you actually want to start screening at 25.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that's like a sibling or parent or
A
grandparent?
sibling, a parent. Yeah. First, yeah, sibling or parent. Yeah.
With Dr. Chisholm, they don't have a family member that had colon cancer. For our audience, who and including our primary care providers listeners, what age should I do a colon cancer screening?
So there's different modalities of colon cancer screening, and colonoscopy is the gold standard. It's the only test that's going to find and remove polyps at the same time. There's various other stool-based testing, stool DNA testing that you may see advertised on TV and so forth. And there's specific risk stratifications to why you would choose certain tests. Of course, we always recommend colonoscopies because that's the gold standard. Not just because we do them, but I think everybody should have at least a baseline index colonoscopy just to make sure everything looks okay, because there could be false positives with some of those other tests, or false negatives. But basically our guidelines just changed and got updated a few months ago. So before, the average age was 50 for the general population across really most ethnicities. However, for African Americans, we have been recommending, and certain societies have also been recommending before the most recent update, to start at age 45 due to disparities. And so for age 45 for African Americans were what I was always recommending. Age 50 for the rest of the general population. However, now everybody is age 45. Everybody across the board. And if there's family history, like mentioned, whether it be a history of colon polyps in, a first degree relative, or colon cancer, that changes risk stratification. And, we'll decide based on that what is the best time and test to perform.
Well, so Dr. Chisholm, when I was working, I retired from the health department, and I recall at one point I read something or either came across my desk that people who were born in 1990 are a population of people who have a greater risk of developing colon cancer. And because it was the first generation that relied so heavily on fast food and high fat foods, period.
That's right.
Have you ever heard that? Linda, you're shaking your head. You've heard that before?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, part of the reason why the guidelines were reduced to age 45 for the general population, we're seeing more younger colon cancers, sporadic, that is popping up, and or some family history there. But definitely the society that we live in currently is fast-paced, grab whatever you can grab to eat. So maybe not the healthiest choices are being made dietary wise. There's different observational studies regarding, Dr. Rawls and I were kind of talking about that, whether, overprescribing of antibiotics, changing the gastrointestinal flora, increasing patients' risk of colon cancer in the future. And so, but dietary is probably the biggest thing, and environmental factors, smoking, vaping, different things can definitely affect vitamin D. There's some observational studies that patients that lack vitamin D, which just about seems like everybody is vitamin D deficient, can also increase not just colon cancer risk, but also different types of cancers. So, you know, you want to make sure you're doing all the preventative things. But I have obviously heard that. So, you know, we just encourage those patients to, you know, identify if there's any symptoms going on. Obviously, colon cancer and polyps can present with zero symptoms and not even know if you have it. You know, it may present with something more odd, or, you know, pain in the side or something, and maybe it's interpreted as something else going on. And, you know, because of the person's age, then you wouldn't think, oh, well, you probably should have a colonoscopy to check that out. So there's many different things, you know, so young colon cancers tend to be missed just because they seek help probably a little bit later than older patients. And also they just kind of blow it off, you know, like, oh, I'll be okay, you know, I'm young. They don't really think of, you know, cancer risk in that age group and stuff, but it is becoming more prevalent. We've had colon cancers that get diagnosed during pregnancy, soon after pregnancy, you know, so a multitude of different things. It's not as common as we get older. Each decade that we increase in age, the risk of colon polyps and colon cancer goes up for everyone. But, you know, and that kind of starts around that 40 and each decade thereafter. So the younger group under the age of 40 are not really thinking about it.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I'm glad that the recommendation for screening went down, because there's something we did to the food supply, and there were those of us who were actually concerned about it, and that was adding folate to bread. So we added folate to grain-based products to decrease the risk of birth defects. But by doing that, you're actually increasing the risk of cancer of the colon, because folate can drive those precancerous cells to continue progression. So people don't really talk about that, but I was excited to see that the screening guidelines went down to a younger age, because it's okay. Do you want a birth defect or do you want cancer of the colon? Well, ideally, you want neither.
Right.
So hopefully, with screening being pushed back, we'll be able to catch it. But
but what about prevention, though? You're telling me now about bread, so am I supposed to avoid bread?
No. Let me
no,
just say
I'm just saying that the risk is higher at a younger age because of adding the folate to the bread. Having said that, if everyone eats their 9 fruits and vegetables a day, and that is, the number is 9, and drinks their water and goes for a walk, it will be a non-issue, because your colon, and everybody's laughing, because your colon will be cleaned out on a regular basis.
No, we laughing because Miss Turner's just doing her Zephyr Hills commercial. She's trying to make me commit suicide.
So, Dr. Ross, I have a question for you, because someone asked this, and I don't know if you had another point, but if you want to go ahead and comment before I move to my next question.
I just want to kind of piggyback on something Dr. Chisholm said earlier. So I think the one of the biggest points that we want to stress in the conversation is prevention. You know, preventing colon cancer, and we mentioned some of the screening tools that are available to prevent colorectal cancer. So, and the big one, I guess, the one we all see, I don't know, I may get in trouble for mentioning the name, but the
Cologuard, I'll say it.
The Cologuard test.
That was going to be my next question, Dr. Ross.
The Cologuard test, yes. It's so in these high-risk patients, which you mentioned, if there's a family history of colon cancer, the only screening tool that's really recommended is the colonoscopy exam, because you're considered high risk if you have a history of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, or ulcerative colitis. You're considered high risk. So none of those other screening tests should be done, just the colonoscopy examination. And a lot of those tests are the stool-based tests, or it checks for blood in the stool, or like the Cologuard, it tests for blood and cancerous DNA. So you're looking for cancer. So I think a much better test is looking for the precancerous polyps and having those removed before the cancer develops. So I just wanted to stress that the colonoscopy is a gold standard, but really the best test is the test that can be done. So any of those tests are better than having nothing at all.
So regarding the Cologuard,
real quick, Ms. Turner, before we get to Cologuard, a lot of times we wind up seeing patients who some other physician may have done a occult test, and I try to make sure patients understand that that's not very sensitive,
right,
or specific,
right,
to colon cancer. But some of the patients tend to think that, okay, my stool was negative, my colon, my occult test for blood in the stool was negative, so I'm good. Or they tend to say that, well, I did have a positive reading, and either one of those can go for maybe at the time that you did the stool
right,
exam of the test, that you were not having any blood in that particular
that's right,
batch of stool, or on the other side of it, you're taking something that can give you a false positive,
that's right,
test as far as blood being in the stool. So I just want to make sure people understand what that means, that you can't just rely. That's why Dr. Rawls is saying it's a gold standard, meaning if you want to know for sure,
that's right,
get that colonoscopy.
That's right.
Well, someone asked a question that if I had my last colonoscopy was good, and I was recommended for every 10 years, 5 or 10 years, let's just say 10 years. Can I now rely on the Cologuard? And if so, how often should I do the Cologuard? Once a year, or should I go back to the every 10? I mean, just not really clear.
Well, I think Dr. Chisholm was going to elaborate on something, and it might have included that, but go ahead, Dr. Chisholm.
Definitely. So just backtrack just a tad bit. So the Cologuard is considered a screening test for polyps and colon cancer. I just want people to know that if that is a test that you do choose, it's first done every 3 years. So if you got a 10-year pass on your colonoscopy, again, going back to the same point, every decade in life that goes up, you have an increased risk of polyps and colon cancer. And keep in mind that if you do a Cologuard test or one of the stool-based testing, if that test comes up positive, it will lead back to you having to do a colonoscopy. So it doesn't, and if it's negative, I've had patients that have had negative stool testing, and maybe a year or two later, they're having some issue that warrants a colonoscopy. And we find precancerous polyps that didn't pop up overnight. So that test missed it.
That's right.
And so, it's really important. Again, going back, prevention is key. But patients sometimes don't understand that when that test comes up positive for the stool testing and you're referred for a colonoscopy, that colonoscopy now becomes a diagnostic colonoscopy. It is no longer a screening test, and you may have some patient financial responsibility for that test versus a screening. Most insurances cover that 100% as a screening test. And I have also seen where patients that has a history of precancerous polyps have done the Cologuard as a follow-up to their colonoscopy a few years later. And I don't understand why, because once you have those polyps, it increases your risk for further development of polyps in the future. So again, going back to colonoscopy.
Excellent point.
So Linda, I need to increase my fiber. You mentioned the recommendation that you've given some patients to have 2 carrots, drink 16 ounces of water, and walk. Well, my question to you is on a daily basis, how easy is it to get the daily recommendation of fiber in one's diet? Give me an example of what that food list might look like.
Okay. So if you have, let's say you eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. If you have a fruit, not juice, but an actual piece of fruit with each meal and snack, you've already gotten 5 fruits in. If you have a large salad with lunch, say a 4 cup salad, you've gotten in 4 vegetables. So if you want to go meatless with that salad and add some, say, a half a cup of black beans,
Mhm.
you're at 5.5. And then if you have with dinner, have 2 more vegetables, 2 hot vegetables, a side salad, and some a whole wheat roll, you're almost at 40 grams of fiber.
Whew.
That's a lot of food, Linda. I'm sorry. I mean, I was trying to take notes. I'm like, so I have a fruit with each meal. I'm going to have a 4 cup salad. So that right there, if I have a fruit with each meal, that's three, because you already told us that hint earlier, nine a day. And so I have the 3 pieces of fruit, the 4 cups of salad. So now I'm at 7. And then I'm going to have a half a cup of black beans. That takes me to 8. Now you're telling me I got to eat 2 hot vegetables. Oh my God, I'm not a vegetarian. Come on, work with me. So if I want to slide some protein in there in terms of meat, then that'll give me, I mean, is there meat that gives me protein, gives me fiber?
Well, you're going to be having meat with these meals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But
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 the
no
beauty,
meat contains fiber, right?
right, right. The beauty of doing the vegetables is that you're only a 4 cup salad is 100 calories.
Mhm.
Now you're going to
And
feel
so I can,
full, but
yeah.
it's only 100 calories. So it's a
So
hundred.
yeah, so let's talk about water real quick because
Okay.
Um, Dr. Kane and I have had this conversation before, and his easy way to always tell you to get in the water is however much you weigh, drink half of that in ounces of water, right? So for all of you, what is that? Is that the gold standard or the easy way to?
Nope,
Because
I didn't say
most
that.
people, I know I'm just using that. I'm teasing. I'm using that, but I know we used to say drink 8-ounce glasses of water a day, or eight ounces glasses of water a day, or whatever. So what's the general rule so people will know how much water am I really supposed to be drinking each day?
Oh, and before you answer that, let me just say this: a disclaimer. It was because I could not have people uh,
To
trying to
easily figure it out.
individualize. It was a general rule that half your weight in water in terms of ounces is what I asked them to do as a disclaimer to what you just said.
Yes, sir.
Well, what you don't want to drink is you don't want to drink carbonated beverages.
I said
That
water.
just doesn't count. You don't want to drink juice. Fruit juice actually has the same amount of sugar as soda. What you
Empty
want,
calories.
empty calories. And so what you want is literal water. One of the things they do at WIC clinics that I think is just fabulous, they'll give someone a 64-ounce container and they'll say, fill it up in the morning and make sure it's empty by the time you go to bed.
Mm.
I love that. That's just an easy way to do it. You don't have to think about it. You just make sure it's empty by the end of the day.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're right. That's an easy way to remember it. So Dr. Rawls, who's most impacted by colon cancer?
Um, we mentioned age. 90% of the cases we still see after the age of 50. So that's a big factor. The family history, that increased risks of developing polyps or colon cancer. Um, if there's a previous history of colon cancer, there's an increased risk of reoccurrence. Patients or folks who've had radiation therapy, so maybe for prostate cancer, that actually puts you at an increased risk of developing colorectal cancer. And then we talked about the environmental factors and the different foods we want to avoid also, processed foods, red meat, and that includes, like Dr. Brown said, pork and lamb. So, yeah, those are things we have to look out for.
So the other white meat doesn't count anymore, really, right?
And I have a comment about kind of to trail Dr. Rawls. So the colon cancer risk is actually highest in African Americans across all ethnic groups. It is highest in our ethnicity. So, and it tends to be in the younger population. And that's why, we try to recommend before the newest guidelines to start at 45. And whether that is access to healthier foods or, disparities in healthcare, or whatever it may be, one thing is metabolic factors, diabetes, hypertension, all these different factors can affect someone's risk. Diabetes causes inflammatory changes within the body that increases the risk, not just for colon cancer, but all cancers. And so you have to take all of those things, and it's higher in the African American communities. So, decreasing all of those risk factors also helps. And the mortality rate for patients in the African American group that are diagnosed has a higher mortality compared to other ethnicities. So it's really, really important to get that prevention done.
Why is mortality so high in African Americans?
Again, access to health care.
When you say mortality, meaning death rate.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
I want to make sure people that are not clinically or medically oriented understand.
So why do Black people die more often than others when it comes to colon cancer?
I think it's related to late detection.
Mm-hmm.
I think it all comes down to that. 38% of colorectal cancer, 38% of cancer is diagnosed in the early stage when it's treatable, when it's beatable, when it's curable. The cure rate in the early stage of colorectal cancer is 90%. And then when you get to regional spread, it drops to about 70%. And by the time you get to distal spread to other organs, it's all the way down to 12%. So early detection is the key.
And I just want to make sure people, Ms. Turner, excuse me, but Dr. Chisholm opened up a whole can of worms when she started talking about, this whole dietary thing. You got to look at food deserts when we start looking at those. I'm old enough to where you guys probably haven't been born yet, but I'm old enough to remember when the gold standard of doing of checking for colon cancer was basically doing a flexible sigmoidoscopy.
That's right.
And they were just looking on the left side of the colon and not looking on the right side of the colon, in which they felt that it was okay only to look at the left side because that's where most Caucasians were developing their colon cancer. And African Americans, at least this was the thought at the time, African Americans, we were suffering from a greater rate of colon cancer on the right side of the colon, simply because, and what we, as Black physicians, and that we really got into the discussion of it, as Black physicians, we got into the fact that we were consuming a very high fat diet, and all that fat was being dumped into the right side of the colon. Mm-hmm. From the small intestine. So we saw a lot more right-sided colon cancer than you saw on the left side. Now, what difference that make is your screening mechanism. That's why colonoscopy became the gold standard. You look at the full colon, not just a piece of it,
That's right.
to make sure that there were no polyps or precancerous lesions.
That's right.
That's
I just
right.
had to get that out.
That's
And
right.
I have
So
a comment regarding, it's not just colon cancer, it's also breast cancer, and other cancers in the African American communities that tend to be late detection. Again, patients may not seek medical care. They may be concerned about, how their doctors will perceive them, or they will perceive the doctors. I mean, some patients don't trust the doctors, and so there's many different hurdles to why patients may delay seeking help. Even patients of all spectrums and races can have a denial factor too, where they know something's wrong, but they're so scared that it actually, freezes them up from seeking the help that they need until it's like in a really bad, spot at that point in time, which, their mortality or death rate went, much higher. So there's many different things. The foods these days are completely different. You have genetically modified foods. Who knows what impact that has on, cancer rates and stuff. And I don't know that unless somebody else knows on the panel, what that actually, impact that has on our health. But I'm sure it's not a good one. And so there's many different things. If you go to a predominantly African American community, you will see fewer grocery stores that offers healthier options. You may not see Publix on every other block. So there's a lot of different things that can impact patients and stuff, and even just get into it. I mean, some patients may have 2 jobs or something. They can't get time off to go to the doctor. They may be single parents. I mean, there's so many different things that will impact the community.
Yeah.
Ms.
one
Brown,
thing that I like to talk about before we move, one point is that I always like to put out there is the importance of knowing your family health history.
That's right.
So, we talked a lot tonight about the first generation, or I forgot what you call it, Dr. Rawls, when it's your siblings or your parents who may have had diseases. But when we get together, a lot of people are planning their family reunions now for the summer. Include conversations about your family's health history. It's a conversation that we need to have with our younger people. I always tell people, when you're plotting the family tree and you have folks, plot next to each name the diseases that people had, because your family may have a rare disease, and later on down the line, someone else may start developing some symptoms,
That's right.
and at least it will already be known what that disease is. And on that note, so I had to put that out there. The health educator in me just had to plug that in. But one thing I wanted to ask Dr. Chisholm or Dr. Rawls is, how early do you tell people to start looking at turning around, looking at their stools after they have a BM? I'm sorry, I just had to put it out there.
I don't know. I don't look at it.
So I
Because younger
definitely
people typically
recommend,
won't do that, right?
just to kind of follow your point about the family history. Some patients, depending on the family dynamic, not everybody has family reunions and so forth. But I definitely encourage patients, because that's one of the questions that I always ask patients. Hey, do you have any, family members, first degree relatives, like parent, sibling, with polyps, or have they ever had a colonoscopy done? And they'll most of the time say they don't know. And I tell them right after that, you need to ask them, if they're still living, you need to ask them, hey, if you had a colonoscopy, what did they find on your procedure? It's not a dinner conversation that people tend to have and will not really discuss, but I do encourage all the patients across the board to discuss with immediate family members if there were any findings on their colonoscopies, and stuff like that. So, and then as far as the stool question, I encourage all the patients to look at their stool.
That's right.
How do you know what's happening? You got to kind of get in tune with your body, and notice any of those changes that may be subtle, whether it be black stools that could indicate digested blood, or bright red blood, or any kind
A
of
worm. It could be a worm.
Yeah.
We get mucus that are worms, every now and then.
What about the shape of the stool? Does that matter?
Yeah.
Yeah, we you want to look and see if there's what they call thin caliber stool, like pencil thin stool, could be a sign of could be a sign of an obstruction in the distal colon or the rectum. New onset constipation. Say if you're normally pretty regular and all of a sudden you develop constipation. Now it could be because of dietary changes also, but all those things we call it a change in the stool pattern. All those things you have to pay attention to. And again, I want to stress, we mentioned symptoms, weight loss, change in the stool caliber, fatigue, but all those occur later, usually later in the disease when it's more advanced. So we want to catch colon cancer in an early stage or prevent it altogether. And that's where the screening process plays a major role.
I can't let this pass without because I got to talk to our behind the scenes technologist. Pass the potatoes. Oh, by the way, when was your last colonoscopy? That was too good to pass up.
Well, related to conversations that people have, a lot of my clients will say to me, I've been constipated all my life. Right. And I say to them, that is not normal.
Right.
It's not normal. So a lot of people just accept that's the way they are. And if we could get that message out that that's not normal, then right. Maybe folks would, because the 9 fruits and vegetables a day, when I get my clients to approach that, they are no longer constipated.
Wow.
And they're like really shocked that they're eating more food and losing weight. Because if you eat that 4-cup salad, you're only going to eat 2 ounces of chicken and have your 2 glasses of water, and you're done. You're done with that meal.
I do try to make sure patients understand when you're talking about, I only have a couple of bowel movements a week or something, and that's normal for me for years. What you got to remember is that increase your exposure to those carcinogens, right. Those agents that causes cancer, and that means prolonged exposure to it. So that's right. Even worse. That's even a worse state, that you don't take comfort in the fact that you only go once or twice a week. As a matter of fact, I try to stress to them that should be concerning. So they're more likely to get a colonoscopy from me. In terms of sending them to you guys, they're more likely to get a colonoscopy than the guy who says, well, I pretty much go once a day, something along that line.
That's right. That's right.
So Linda, I wanted to get back to a point, because if I have diabetes, and now you suggested in the earlier when we talked, if you have 1 fruit with every meal, should I be that person if I have diabetes too? If I'm trying to increase my fiber, but I have diabetes, is it okay for me to eat to include a fruit with each of my meals?
That's actually
in addition to the 4 cups of salad.
That can be individual. Now, the fruit that you don't want to be eating is a banana, because that gives you twice as many carbs as any other fruit. But if it's an orange, if it's berries, if it's a peach, a pear, a plum, and you are not eating a large number of carbs with the meal. So if you had a fruit, instead of having 2 cups of
Juice.
mashed potatoes, or a pile of rice, you'll probably be okay.
I got to comment on that right there, this Turner. Not because I'm a know-it-all, but I got to comment on because I see it all the time or hear it all the time from patients, and I make the comment. And Ms. Brown, you can correct me if I'm mistaken. Remember that was the time where they talked about fruits are kind of a free food, so to speak. They used to say that. I'm just going out with it. The bottom line is that at least if you eat a fruit, you got some fiber that because we are mixed between carnivores and herbivores, that we at least the fiber in the fruit increase the energy needed to digest food, and so you do tend to burn more calories when you eat a fruit, especially as opposed to drinking a juice.
Well, what it also does is the fiber slows it down in your GI tract. So instead of your blood sugar spiking because you drank a glass of orange juice, your blood sugar is going to go up more slowly
Yeah,
if you eat the fruit itself.
right. Okay. But it's still spend energy trying to digest that fiber.
And it's not going to get digested. So
So other than
that's
black
my
beans,
definition of what fiber is.
so other than black beans, what other beans or peas can I eat that are high in fiber, or are all of them?
All of them are high in fiber. So the thing you have to be careful with if you're diabetic with the beans is the portion size. Just because it's good, it doesn't mean you can eat as much as you want. So a serving is a half a cup. Now, a lot of folks will have a meal and they'll have a cup of black beans. That's 2 servings. Then they will have a cup of rice. That's 3 servings. So if you had a half a cup of black beans and a third of a cup of brown rice and 3 ounces of meat and that 4-cup salad, you're not going to be hungry and you're going to be well on your way to having that meal leave your system fairly quickly.
One of the things that I like when I talk to Linda is she gonna break that thing down, right? She gonna tell you put that. You see how she put that whole meal together. I have my large salad with my half a cup of black beans and my third a cup of brown rice and my 3 ounces of meat. Well, for those of you who are listening and not gonna remember that, make sure that you know, and you work and you have health insurance, make sure you know what your health insurance plans offer. Because what it offers, I know with my plan offers me the option to go see a registered dietitian like Linda, just like my plan pays for me to go see a primary care doctor like Dr. Kane, right? So know
And
that when
screening
we talk about,
colonoscopy.
and Dr. Rawls, since okay, so and Dr. Rawls and Dr. Chisholm when it's time for my colonoscopy. But the point is, know what your health insurance plan covers, because one of the things that Dr. Kane always says, you don't go to a mechanic to what's your thing? You don't go to a mechanic to make you feel better if you have a cold or if you're sick,
Right. You
right?
don't go to
So we
mechanics for
need
your
a
medical
team.
advice.
Right. We need a team of people to help us manage our health. You know, get your primary care physician, get
Great.
you a registered dietitian, get you a personal trainer, because one of the things that Dr. Chisholm talked about is the importance of regular exercise in the grand scheme of things. And maybe because of some physical limitations, you're not sure what exercises you should be doing. Although Linda already told us, get out and walk, right? But
Right.
some people have, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who was saying that they're having back issues, so they can't walk. So you have to have a team of people to help you manage your illnesses. Now, one of the questions that was posted that we've never answered is, how is late detection related to healthcare disparities, food deserts, and poor mental health? Anybody want to tackle that one? I know that's kind of asking a lot, but we talked about the whole notion, and I think it was you, either Dr. Rawls or Dr. Chisholm, talked about the fact that African Americans we tend to die more of colon cancer because maybe we don't have access to care or access to healthy foods. So, and I think that's what the question was related to in terms of the healthcare disparities.
Now, I can address that as a primary care doc because it's kind of a more
Mhm.
diverse question, and that is, having access. My area of town, there is somewhat of a food desert there. You may go 5 to 10 square miles
Mm,
before you can get to a decent grocery store.
mm,
And then some of the grocery stores that I do see in that neighborhood, they're not necessarily the traditional ones, and they may be. Truth be told, you may go to a Harvey's, formerly Winn Dixie, whatever it may be, and you can walk in, and you just smell the fat sometimes
mm,
Mhm.
because in our neighborhood they feel they need to offer a lot of those fatty foods, and but then also as you begin to try to walk to go to get your fruits and vegetables, you got to pass the chips, you got to
mm.
pass the chips on sale and the drinks on sale,
Yeah.
cookies on sale. You go through
Yeah.
all this maze. It's like you got to put up a fight just to get to the fruit that you need to get to. And so, and then when you do bring it home, whether it's I say low main, but whatever it is that those noodles that people eat, very high in
Ramen.
very little true nutrition, and so on and so on. And when you do bring it home, because it's quick to serve, and particularly with a mother and sometimes fathers whom working and they got to do a quick meal for those kids that are waiting home for them to come home and cook or get them something to eat. You bring in very, very non-nutritious foods,
Mm,
very low in fiber foods. And so those kids begin to learn what to eat from their parents. And then they in turn pass it on to their kids, obviously.
Mhm.
And then, and in particular, if you can't get access to reasonable foods with fiber and stuff that you need, and you go to school the next day, and you watch your friends and other students come in with really good, decent food,
mm.
mentally that begins to affect you as an individual, as a kid. And I can say that, and I know Dr. Rawls is special understanding because we grew up in the same neighborhood.
We did.
We got to have been 100 years apart, you know. But the neighborhood was the
Not
same.
quite 100.
Dr. King, one thing you talked about.
Not available in that neighborhood. So,
Right.
From a mental standpoint, I just wanted to get that out there. And while
Yeah.
I'm at it real quick, the folic acid, I typically, those women of childbearing age, I'd much rather just supply them with supplemental folic acid than giving it in the bread and stuff of that nature. One. And two, when it comes down to vitamin D, the more pigmented you are, the less vitamin D you actually have being made.
Mm,
Because of the pigmentation in your skin blocking the effect of ultraviolet light, blah 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 blah. I think I think Ms. Brown understands exactly what I'm saying. And then people like us who tend to work inside
right.
all the time, no
Right.
sun exposure. Most sun I get is walking to my car in the morning and then walking back to the car coming out of work. So there's not a whole lot of sun exposure. So my vitamin D level, since you guys mentioned vitamin D, can be very low. So we need to think about giving supplementation for vitamin D, particularly in African Americans because of our one, lack of sun exposure, and two, the inhibition of the making of vitamin D caused by the same thing that protect us from skin cancer.
Right. It's,
So one of the things that you talked about, Dr. Kane, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, but although we're at the show should be ending now, but we'll wrap up the show. But one of the things that I also learned years ago, when you're talking about going in a grocery store and shopping, Dr. Kane, all those fragrances that you get when you come in, in the past, it used to be that if we stick to the perimeter, the
Mhm.
outer aisles of the grocery store, that's where the foods are that concentrated or a place that we should purchase first. And if you visualize and you think about when you go to the grocery store, you'll have produce, the dairy products, the protein, and then all the other stuff are on the middle aisles in terms of the grains and all that other stuff that you should avoid. Am I right, Linda?
It is still true.
Hmm.
Stay on the outside. It's still
Make,
true.
make you feel like you Muhammad Ali. You got to walk to that center. You got to do this. Trying
And
to
kids
dodge.
don't need the chips.
So we're at the end of our broadcast, and I think it was a very not think this is a very interesting discussion. We see first of all that we have some a great group of experts right here in our own community. For those of you who are in Northeast Florida, we have Dr. Cian Chisholm and Dr. Renard Rawls with the Borland Groover Clinic. And then we have Linda Lockett Brown with Sinet. Did I say it right? Nutrition. Tell
Registered
me.
dietitians.
Yeah, so we have some access to some great resources, and of course, one of the best primary care physicians in Jacksonville, Dr. Rogers Kane.
Yeah.
So just we have access to so many good resources in our town. We don't have to look far. We are appreciative of even the members of the Northeast Florida Medical Society who support the show and who are posting questions. Don't forget to say this or don't forget to say that. Thankful to that. But we do like to give our guests an opportunity to share some final thoughts for our listeners, which, by the way, for those people who didn't watch the show live, they'll have a chance to watch the show on YouTube or on Facebook because we do
Or
broadcast there.
Spotify. And
Or
Spotify.
right. And so, give those final thoughts. And then of course, we're also going to post your information for people to know how to get in touch with you after the show if they'd like to, or if you can say that in your final thoughts. And I'll
And
go.
wait a minute. Before they get the final thought, and since you mentioned the medical society, I've been getting texts from some people. Just very interesting. I thought this was kind of cute. One of our contributors to the show quite often, Dr. Kimberly Barbell Johnson, says, in research, we call it your ZNA, meaning zip code influence on health outcome are as important as your DNA and family history. Thought
Mhm.
that was pretty
That's a good one.
indicative of
Yeah.
some. And then the other thing she said is, and because it's such a very used drug, is don't forget B12 in chronic metformin patients.
That's a good point.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Kane. So, Linda, I'll start with you. What are your final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
When I think about family history, your family history is not a death sentence. And I totally understand that people don't have a lot of time, but start somewhere. So if you're eating one vegetable, go up to two. If you're eating two, go up to three. So start where you are, and it may mean that you do have to drive a little further to get the vegetables. My I grew up on the north side, and I would buy groceries for my grandmother and take them to the north side because it costs less money to buy it in Orange Park and drive it. But start wherever you are, and don't just eat things because that's what was fed to you when you grew up. When you know better, do better.
Mm.
Thank you. Dr. Chisholm?
So I think, definitely at the end of the day, March is colon cancer awareness month. Just get out there, talk to your primary care physicians. There are some insurance companies that don't require someone to have a primary care physician, and they, may have a harder time navigating the healthcare system. But just get in. I have a kind of micro focus on women's health, especially. So, get your mammograms, get your colonoscopies, and just do the best that you can and keep moving. As far as exercise and trying to improve dietary and making those changes necessary for future growth.
Thank you, Dr. Chisholm. Dr. Rawls?
Prevention is the key. Is March Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So we start screening at age 45. If there's a family history, we start younger, age 40. Talk to your primary care physician if you haven't had this done. There are a lot of screening tools available, but the gold standard is still the colonoscopy examination.
Thank you. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts for tonight's show?
Well, a couple of quick things, because I know we've held our guest panelists up a little longer than what we usually do. One is I'm happy to hear about, I know we've been talking about it for a while, but happy to hear that they finally have passed the given approval for starting their screening at 45, particularly as it relates to African Americans, whether they have a family history or not. Okay. And then if they do have a family history, even earlier than that. That's one. Two, Ms. Brown, Dr. Brown mentioned going to driving and drive a little further to get this and get that. We do recognize that a lot of people don't have the ability to drive. They may be on a bus line and may not be able to get access to those foods and the good foods and the good nutrition that they need. So I want other people who do have that ability to be cognizant of their family and relatives and try to help them out in terms of accessing those foods and take it to them. You bring it to them. You don't have to call and ask, do you need it? Just take it to them. Particularly some of the people who I got a lot of older folks that don't drive anymore for one reason or another. Whether or not it's because of the high price of gas or whether or not it's because they just don't feel comfortable driving. So when you want to think about your relatives, just go do it for them. And then the other thing would be, I really want to know and want stated here, Dr. Chisholm, Dr. Rawls, your patients or your future patients need to know where you're at and with whom you're working with and how to get to you. You guys, I know you're being very modest, but this show is all about access to healthcare. So we need to know, we need to put out there how to a patient who says, I really like Dr. Chisholm or I really like Dr. Rawls and what he had to say. How do I get to these guys? And we know primary care can refer them. But as you said before, Dr. Chisholm, some people may not need to go through their primary care to get access. So you need to enlighten them as where you're at and where you can best serve them.
So we're part of Borland Groover, which is a large gastroenterology group within kind of the Northeast Florida area, and my particular location is in the Fleming Island location, and the phone number to this office is 904-214-8080. But if you also go on the Borland Groover website, patients are able to make their appointments directly themselves or even get their procedure scheduled directly through their primary care physician, direct access patients. So we've kind of limited one barrier to get that procedure done. So definitely just get in any way you can.
That's right.
Dr. Rawls?
And I'm located at St. Vincent's Riverside in the Dillon building. The office number is 904-381-9393.
Dr. Rawls, you're also over off Bar Street, is that not right?
Our endoscopy center. You're right. That's right. Off the bars.
Okay. And so I want to make sure that people are aware that you guys are available, taking new appointments, have appointments available. But also, Ms. Brown, Dr. Brown, we need to hear from you as well.
Okay, my office is in Orange Park. The phone number is 276-8050, but I do telehealth. So you can be anywhere and we can communicate.
That's right.
And then one last thing, Miss Turner, before you shuffle me to the side, the the one thing I do want to make sure that people understand is that we will be putting that same information they just provided on our website. It will also, you can access our website from the Northeast Florida Medical Society, and not to forget that Northeast Florida Medical Society is the Jacksonville's Black Doctors Association, and that people, when you need certain physicians, you can go and get our website, go to our website, nefms.com, and you can find access to Pause for the Truth, and you can also find access to other physicians that you may feel better serve your needs.
I don't know why, Dr. Kane. I was thinking it was nefms.org, so it's .com.
.org. My bad.
So
that's Zephyr Hill water. It's too much of it.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to my co-host, Dr. Rogers Kane. Thank you to Tyrone Jackson. Call tyrone.net for all your technology needs. And thank you for all who consistently tune into Pause for the Truth every Tuesday night, where we try to keep you informed about what's really going on here in Northeast Florida. Obviously, the information that we talked about, it doesn't matter where you are, anybody could learn from the discussion that we had tonight. It's not a conversation that many of us like to have, talking about our stools and things, when you should look at them, if you should look at them. But what we hope to have imparted to you tonight is that you've got to know your body. Recognize when things change in your body. Don't be ashamed. Have the conversation with your doctor, your medical team. Go and see a registered dietitian. Linda will talk to you. Telehealth, as she said, that means, we're all about this virtual space now. So you can do it from the comfort of your home. Bottom line is, don't overlook your health. Tune in next week as we will continue the discussion. We're probably going to talk about COVID. I know you said, oh my God, here we go with COVID again. But guess what, folks? Just because things are opening up, it doesn't mean that COVID has gone away. The Delta variant is still present. The Omicron variant is still present. The stealth Omicron variant is out there. We like to talk about how you socialize, have fun in the sun safely with your family and friends. Dr. Kane, you had your finger up. I know that's indicative of one more
last
point.
comment. And because I failed to do this, I want to thank all our guests for coming on board and helping us provide such a great broadcast. And I don't just talk the talk, but I walk the walk. I've had my colonoscopy, as Dr. Rawls can attest, within the past 2 weeks.
He did.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. So have a good evening, everyone. And again, see you next week on Pause for the Truth. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.